Thank you all for joining us. I'm Taylor Martin from Reveal, and I am so excited to bring to you today a very close friend of mine and a colleague and highly esteemed in B2B tech, Andrew Newton. Andrew, I'll let you introduce the rest of yourself.
Thanks, Taylor. Good to meet again, and hi everyone. Good to be on the session here. So I've been involved in partnering for over 20 years now, moving from kind of a sales environment into building major alliance relationships for tech growth companies, working with people such as IBM, HP, Ericsson, CGI, as well as a whole host of VAR and specialist consultancies, and working with those guys to sell whatever product I've been working on all over the world, and learned a hell of a lot through that process. I think the last couple of years I've been running my own consulting business to bring this expertise and particularly industry best practice, which I'm pretty passionate about, working with some of the organizations in the industry into this kind of SaaS-based growth sector. And I absolutely passionately believe in the harnessing the power of partnerships is one of the best growth strategies that organizations can pursue. So that's what I'm here to help.
Amazing. And for the folks who are just joining us, please hold any questions. We'll answer all. We'll do a live Q&A at the end. And then if we don't get to everything, feel free. We'll send a way to communicate with us directly. And we're here to talk about that power of the partnerships and how to tap into it in the ecosystem. So Andrew, ecosystem, as we were talking earlier offline, ecosystem is a really trendy word. It's kind of all over the B2B tech space. And like I mentioned before, someone mentioned to me, like, that's just like a BS word. It doesn't have a lot of value because people don't really understand what it means. And so here we are. We're going to talk about the ecosystem. Can you give us a definition of how it works in the context of B2B tech?
Yeah, I think in some ways you're right, Taylor. I mean, I think it has become the cool word. And in some ways it's replaced terms that we've used previously, like a partner community or even sometimes the partner program. And I question the validity of that, because at its best, an ecosystem is numbered in different ways. I think if we look at the broader definition of an ecosystem, the definition is really it's a complex network or an interconnected system. Or even in the biological sense, it's a community of interacting organisms within their own physical environment. And I think they're quite helpful pictures, actually. So if we consider this together and think about how it applies to our context, then it's different than traditionally how we thought about partnering. So I think an ecosystem is much less of a one-to-many type of structure, but rather one in which relationships are more mutually dependent and operate at multiple levels, not kind of just very top down from major vendor into smaller players, but much more peer-to-peer operated, and really that's driven by the need to rapidly innovate to meet fast changing customer needs in the B2B space.
Oh yeah.
So maybe just to give you an example, major cloud vendors have created large partner ecosystems, and a wide variety of their partners can engage with each other within that. So Microsoft's been a leader in this space with their P2P program, encouraging their ISVs and VARs to work with each other to target new sectors and different types. So, I think the collaborative aspect of the ecosystem is perhaps different from a multi-tiered partner program that we've seen in the past.
And in your experience, how has the importance of the partner ecosystem to a company evolved over the years? And why do you think that is?
I think, it's been clear over the last 20 years that an effective partner program and engagement with partners has been centrally important to some of the fastest growth software companies that we've seen, a lot of the majors. And over that time, it's become a particular discipline and a particular skill as partnering. And organizations such as Alliance's Best Practice have proven the ROI of this work, in working with large strategic partnerships and seeing, massive growth opportunities emerge between major to major, if you like, in these strategic partnerships. I think the difference today actually is that the pace of change is accelerated, and therefore companies have to develop and grab market share more quickly, because the guys who move fastest tend to become the market leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one change. I think the second piece is that the majors are actually recognizing ecosystems the future. So there were a couple of reports that came out I thought were pretty interesting. So one of them was Accenture in 2018 had a report that was called the Cornerstone of Future Growth Ecosystems. And in that report, 76% of business leaders agreed that the current business models that they operate will be unrecognizable within the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think we've already seen evidence of that. I think similarly, EY in their 2020 ecosystem partnering article, said 68% of execs believe that ecosystems were the only way to succeed in today's market. So that's really interesting. I think partnering has been seen as sometimes being an optional or an adjunct to a sales process, but I think it's becoming much more central, and certainly the organizations that do it well are the ones that succeed disproportionately from everyone else. So there are 4 key principles that EY came up with, which I think are very instructive about what an ecosystem is, that's kind of a good measure, which I can share with you if that'd be helpful, Taylor.
Yes.
So I think the first one is they talk about an ecosystem as being human-centric, and not in necessarily the touchy-feely way, although that's important to learn to be collaborative, but it's about how do you create real value there that impacts the customer. I think secondly, we talked about this a lot, and we'll come back to it, which is a collaborative and inclusive culture. I think innovation works well in a collaborative environment where it's safe to do so. I think the third one is interesting, which is thinking about operating irrespective of your size as a startup and scale up strategy. So the idea that we'll try some things, figure out whether they work, and if they work, scale it up fast. So really, test your partnerships, figure out whether they're going to work, and then if they work, scale them up. Then I think the last one, which comes back to the principles of partnering, is about having the right programs, contracts, and internal processes in place to really make your ecosystem work effectively. And that's kind of the security aspect of it, if you like, create an environment of trust. That's what those are there for. I think there's, certainly if we think about what the implications of that are, we talked a little bit about SaaS, but cloud and open APIs, they're absolutely speeding up time to market and accelerating integrations. If I think about how complex it was to do integrations 15, 20 years ago, it's now fundamentally different. If the APIs are out there, it can be self-serve. You can turn on very, very, very quickly. And again, you can get to market much more quickly. So the ability to partner and get to revenue is accelerated. But it does mean that that getting it right and doing the right thing and scaling fast is what makes the leaders really work. And I think there are a couple of reports that the majors did that I think is really interesting. Accenture came out with a report in 2018 called The Cornerstone of Future Growth around ecosystems, in which 76% of business leaders agreed that their current business models will be unrecognizable within 5 years. So, this is a fundamental change. Similarly, EY came up with a similar figure of 68% believe that ecosystems are the only way to succeed in today's market. And they set out a set of principles around what that looks like. So EY's view, which I think is very instructive actually, is that ecosystems should be human-centric, and that by that I think they mean they create real life or real customer value. I mean, that we're in business, we have to create value in the end, but we do that in a collaborative environment where there's an inclusive culture, and again that's really important to innovation. I think the third one is, irrespective of the size of organization, that we start to think about operating in a startup to scale up strategy. So try some things out, and if it works, scale it up fast, but do qualify hard first. We'll come on to that later. And I think the last thing is about establishing trust in these relationships that we're building, and robust contracts and internal processes are really important part of that. And I think why do I think this is really important, particularly right now? I think the reason is that with everyone moving to the cloud and open APIs, that's really speeding up time to market by accelerating integrations and the ability to collaborate faster to provide customers what the customers need. And the organizations that do that effectively at scale will be the ones that win market share faster than their competitors. So, I think it is an existential opportunity and potentially a threat for organizations.
And so what would you say are the key components you think a company should have when they decide to establish a partner program to effectively utilize their ecosystem?
That's a great question, Taylor, actually. I think what's interesting here is that whilst ecosystems are relatively new and exhibit different characteristics from older programs, the fundamentals of best practice partnering that have been developed over the last couple of decades are still absolutely foundational. So I would say, as a starting point, before you can really determine your partnering strategy and therefore the program, I think it's really important to kind of step back, ensuring that there's a clearly laid out growth strategy along with an associated sales and market-driven go-to-market plan. So I think the focus is really important here, deciding, your target customer types, the market sectors, the geographic reach, all is the baseline on which the partner strategy is built. If you don't understand how to take your own product to market and who your sweet spot customers are, it's really, really hard for partners to understand how to do that. And that's important. Once you have that in place, you can start to determine what types of partners can help meet these goals, be they platform vendors or complementary ISVs or consultancies, value-added resellers, or even market specialists. But fundamentally, a partner program is a formal way to recognize this collaborative win-win relationship that sets out the roles, responsibilities, goals, and opportunities, as well as the boundaries of the partnership. And we'll go into more detail about what that's all about kind of later. But for me, those parts of what you're building on in order to be successful in your partnering.
And so what do you think are the biggest or most consistent mistakes companies make when they're creating their programs?
There could be many and various, to be fair. I think probably the top one I would say is the lack of a clear, well thought out plan. I think many organizations kind of get started a bit tactically. So, CEO might say, we think we should do something with partnering, and I know this guy, or, we have a successful relationships here, let's turn that into a partnership. And I think we recognize it still takes time to get that clarity, but I think the investment that you make will stop you wasting time and effort. So I think we talked earlier about having a clear view of your target market and the bullseye customer, and making sure you've got a solution and a proposition that's valuable for the customer. That's the starting point for everything. Then I would suggest understanding who those customers rely on, who do they listen to, who are their trusted advisors, and they're going to be influencers on who they think about for solutions in the buying journey, or even do they have a requirement that your solution works with. And different players will impact different parts of the sales process. So, for instance, a consultancy might be involved much earlier in the sales process than an IT provider or a cloud vendor or a complementary provider may come in later into the picture. So it's about understanding the whole customer buying journey as well. And once you start to build that picture, then you can start to identify your potential candidates, and we'll come on to how do we qualify those and what does that look like. But I think that's the start point. I think the second biggest thing is around culture, and your own company culture is probably the biggest component here. I think issues in creating successful partnerships could often be just a culture within an organization or the senior management team, or even perhaps a lack of clarity across the business on what's expected from partners, what they can achieve and what is required from them to do that. And again, being very clear at the outset about what you want to achieve with partners and getting your organization on board is important. But fundamentally, partnerships are a collaborative venture built on trust, based on relationships where you have an agreed vision and clarity about what success looks like for each of you and the skills to kind of make that happen. And that can be undone by some bad behavior. And managing all of that is, I think, one of the key skills of an alliances professional, actually, is to be the advocate for the partner inside your own organization, but to be the company's advocate with the partner is kind of the alliance's role. And in that way, you have a foot in both camps.
Amazing. What are some of the biggest challenges for building or expanding a company's ecosystem? This is the hot topic of 2021, building and expanding a company's ecosystem. What do you recommend for solutions?
Yeah, I think it depends on the size and the maturity of the organization that you're working with as to how you might go tackle that and whether you've got an existing ecosystem. But in my career, it's very clear. I think this is not rocket science. Is that in all cases demonstrating success is always the catalyst. It's always about how do you get to the sales. The challenge is what are the steps that you follow to get there. That's the really important thing. I think I would say for an organization that's starting to engage partners and build an ecosystem, I think the challenge often is to how to start building something with limited resources without necessarily having a clear view about what types of partners are likely to drive most success. So I think that comes into that piece we talked about earlier, which is this startup scale-up view of how to work, if you like. I guess my recommendation here is to go back to your company's growth plan. So every company will have one. They'll have a view of which market sectors they want to go after, and pick one or two areas where partners could play a really effective role, and make sure that you get buy-in to your senior management team to do that. Once you've done that, then you can go and research and qualify the potential partners to determine how they can help. Again, thinking about that customer journey that we talked about earlier, linking to that, working out, okay, what's the ecosystem from a customer's perspective is actually really important. So it's not about, as a SaaS company ourselves, we see the universe from our perspective. We need to see the universe from customer's perspective and the partner's perspective and start to think like they do. I think if we can do that, then some of the other things, the value that we bring, we start to look at from somebody else's perspective. I think that's a really important factor to work through. I think, qualifying your partners, and we'll go into partner qualification a bit more about what are the factors there. But it's about the activities that are going to drive success. So it's about being clear on what is it you do together and what's the market opportunity. Are they dealing with the right customers, for instance? And I think this is an area where the reveals tools can be really helpful in qualifying the market opportunity with a partner rather than doing guesswork, and that allows you to scale. I think for more established players who've demonstrated some initial partner success, I think the challenge could be the scale-up part. Is that you can do a lot with some bright people and working things, if you like, hand cranking stuff. I think, but once you get into a scale, you've got to have the programs in place to be able to engage your partners seamlessly, have the right agreements, have the portal, give them access to information, make the onboarding easy, have a technical integration team that really help that happen more quickly. And I think the scale up challenge is about programmatically tackling the partner growth.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying for that scale up part is really having the resources and the time, which is a resource, for the partner experience, because that seems like
and the right tools in place as well. I mean, I think we live in a a 24/7 self-service world where everyone expects it now, and I think that's how we should think about how we work from a tech sector perspective as well. And that sounds easy. There are some challenges to doing that, but I think making that investment can be very powerful.
So who can benefit? That was a very delayed, dramatic pause. I apologize. Who can benefit? Who can benefit from the partner ecosystem?
I think all sizes of organizations can actually benefit from ecosystems, and I think independent software vendors or solution vendors probably have the most potential, because I think there are so many different aspects to play. As a vendor, do you work with consultancies, or do you have integration partners, or are you working with some of the major platform vendors? You have a number of different angles to go and play with, and you have a technology-based proposition that solves some specific challenges. So I think a lot of the areas that about defining your partnership, I think the ISVs really have an opportunity to kind of play in most effectively. And I think if we look at how the majors are doing this, Microsoft, AWS, all the majors are building ecosystems and encouraging this collaborative work within their partner community to make it work. And I think that is a place where smaller players can find success. I think it has its challenges, but also thinking about other smaller ecosystems you can join, or even becoming an ecosystem player yourself.
Yeah, I think that very often we forget that we have our own ecosystems, and it's very possible for us to expand our own, to create our space, to create place for ourselves. So how do you recommend qualifying partners?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you say, I think partner qualification is actually really important. I think gone are the days where we can just sign a partner because we had a coffee with somebody and it seemed like a good idea, or it's a pure branding marketing play. I think partnering these days has to achieve some hard corporate objectives, whether that be market awareness, whether that be market share. But usually, all the partnerships I've done, it's all been about driving sales in the end, and that should be the right measure. Let's face it. I mean, there are two approaches in the marketplace. There's kind of a self-qualification approach that the majors use, or what I call an active qualification approach. So self-qualification is really being used effectively by the majors. Oracle have done this for years. All the majors have, AWS, Microsoft. But because anybody can become a base level partner by signing up, that's completely self-serve. And you progress the tiers by doing technical training, doing sales activities, you pay a fee, and that is self-service in the lower part. But the downside is it may take you a long time to get on the agenda with those guys. And that's the challenge for a smaller player. Once you start generating pipeline and you get them interested and start to drive some numbers, then that works. But that only works for the big guys, I think. I think for most organizations and for most people on this call, you're at a stage where you're going to want to do your active qualification of partners, because you have got a limited resource to do it. You're not trying to do a global market. You're trying to achieve some very specific objectives. So, I think you have to get some clear criteria together. So I think there's a few bullet points here that is worth considering. I think firstly, with the partners, is their market proposition and your market proposition, are they well aligned? and are they complementary? That has to be a start point. You know, is there an alignment in their underlying technology, for instance? Do you sit on similar cloud platforms, or, you know, do you have common vendors in partnership with you? I think the other piece that's actually super important, we touched on already, is are they talking to the right customers? Are they in your target market sector? I think, you know, some people call this, you know, what's your bullseye customer? Who's your ideal profile customer? And are they calling on them? And again, you know, the reveal tool could be quite helpful in doing this, as to really understand, if you know what your target customer looks like and you need to, you know, where's the crossover and where are the opportunities? And then looking at the sector, which other complementary partnerships are there that help? Customers buy solutions that integrate with each other and are looking at whatever they're buying, they're looking at how does it fit with all the processes that fit around their environment, and how do all the different software applications and the processes that they run, how do they all fit together? And the simpler that you can make that for the customer, and the tighter you have those relationships, the easier it is for your partners to sell that. And it allows you to go to those partners to go fishing for who are the viable partners too. Certainly find out whether they work with competitors. That doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it's certainly a red flag. You know, are they unhappy with the competitors? Does that mean that you can take that partnership from them by doing a better job? You know, is the partnership growing? Do they want to grow? Are they going after new markets? Again, you want to have a partner that has a growth mentality like you do. And do they see this partnership that you want to build together? Is it a fundamental part of their growth strategy? Because if it's not, are they going to invest any time in it? So I think there are some important criteria here to kind of think through, and there's obviously a whole bunch of other things as well that go into that, but I think those are probably the fundamentals.
Yeah, and probably even with these fundamentals, diving deeper to get, but these are excellent. This is a great place to start. So in your experience, what is the most effective way to convert new partnerships into revenue? That's a big question.
Yeah. It's the big question, and it's always the hardest part. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier. For most commercially driven organizations, the ultimate measure, and so, is sales. You know, that's where we're all getting to. Or let's say customer, to use a less vulgar term than sales perhaps. But, you know, it's about getting these first wins together, and that's always a pivotal proof point. But remember, you know, sales is an output metric, and it's the inputs that produce the results of the app that actually is important. If you measure sales, it's a lagging indicator, of course, and it takes time to get there. So, you know, I would say if we look at what the inputs are, I think, you know, a clear approach we talked about already, and both organizations identifying and committing to jointly pursue initial target counts between partners is important, and how you support the partner in that process is really important. Is it a joint sales type of process? Are you walking into the customer together? I think that I've seen that's really very powerful. You learn more about how the other people tell the story. They have a different perspective of the customer for you. So, for example, if you're working with a consultancy or a major vendor and account, they grow their business by selling more to the same customer typically. Whereas if you're an ISV, you typically grow by selling to more customers. So there are slightly different aspects of play here, but they produce relative strengths which allow you to leverage each other's capability. The consulting partner might have a set of capabilities, but you might have a cool product that the customer is really interested. So that helps them get into a new part of the business. So I think focusing on what that win-win is within the customers and running these processes and staying really tight to it is absolutely super, super critical. I think the third part that we kind of touched on a little bit before is, you know, the culture and the buy-in of your senior executive team. That's really important too. And that's really important that the partnership stays tight and you remain committed to getting to the joint win all the way through the process. And if that starts to diverge, that's a killer for the partnership. So, juggling all of those different aspects of getting through a sales process is important. I would say in a higher value sale, let's say, where the customer's making a significant decision. I would say those are the key success factors.
Oh, those are great. Ooh, that's good. Before our last question, I'm going to suggest to our audience to start considering what sort of questions you'd like to ask in the next few minutes. I'm going to ask Andrew one more question, which is actually my favorite question to ask anybody on the planet.
This is Taylor's usual question, is it?
It's the question. It's my favorite one because it's applicable in all scenarios. But particularly in this one, with your experience, could you share one of the hardest lessons you learned or a challenge that you overcame for others to learn from?
I think for me, not in every circumstance, but in many of the circumstances, and I've probably worked for 6 or 7 different companies where I've been in partnership engagement or partnership or leadership position. I think the consistently hardest challenge has been to overcome the internal doubters on the time and resource it takes to build a successful partnership. Everyone thinks it should be quicker. Everyone thinks it's a bit like a normal customer sales process, and recruiting partners is absolutely not that. It takes longer, it takes more time and effort. And I think the bigger and more strategic the partnership is, the longer it takes to do that. So I think that's the hardest one. I think there's a life cycle here, which is that partnerships often start with a real buzz, because everyone sees the potential opportunity, whatever that looks like, and everyone gets super excited about it. And then if it takes longer to turn into reality, then you're always under pressure to produce results, and that's the commercial world. I'm fine with that. But I've learned that in these circumstances, just keeping absolutely focused on winning the customer opportunities and supporting the partners absolutely to deliver results. And some of the sales processes I've been involved with will go on for over 2 years, for instance. It's crazy.
You got to be patient.
Yeah. But what comes out of that, and I think David talked about this on the session that we had yesterday internally, is that you build some very strong relationships as an alliances person working with your partners that mean that you can be honest with each other. And I think that's really important. And I've built relationships with people that I've had for 20 years now. And that's a key part of the success, is to be who you are, be real and be straight, is important. I mean, the one thing I wish I did have back when I was doing it was this ability to do the joint count mapping. I have to be honest. That always takes a lot of time and investment to get to that point, and particularly if you're doing it at scale. So what you guys do is really exciting in that regard.
Yeah, we think what we're doing is very exciting in that regard too, in many regards. Those are excellent lessons, and I guess if the platform didn't exist then, at least it exists now, and
exactly.
And free. So
and
it's
free. Can't beat that.
Unintentional plug. Amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and request to our audience, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can send them in a private chat message if you're more comfortable.
Yeah.
And as we're doing that, and also while we're wrapping up, I just want to thank you so much for sharing all of your insight. I think it's been absolutely incredible, and what you've shared has been so valuable, I think, for partnership managers and anybody really who's considering launching a partner program. I know that there's a CEO who's launching a startup out of Charlotte, and this was one of his questions, was like, how do I grow my program? So absolutely wonderful. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Taylor from Reveal is a free collaborative growth platform helping revenue builders around the world access the ecosystem. And by revenue builders, I mean partnerships, marketing, and sales. How can people try out the Reveal platform? We actually have put into the chat, and we'll put one more time into the chat, a link to Reveal's website so that you can go and learn more about us and get a free demo. There it goes. They're happy to share it. And if you are interested in learning more about Reveal, again, go to the website. And if you're interested in learning more about Andrew, where can we find you?
You find me on LinkedIn.
Amazing.
So we can put a link to that in the chat, but it shouldn't be too difficult to find, I hope. And if anybody has got any further questions or would like a chat, then just ping me on LinkedIn and we'll set something up.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Andrew, thank you so much. And we will share this also in your LinkedIn, also in the follow-up notes for this as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. It's been
Wonderful.
fun.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Have a great day.
Cool. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.